There comes a quiet moment in life, not marked by any celebration or milestone, when something shifts. You've spent decades being the guide, the protector, the one they ran to when the world felt too big. You held their hands through scraped knees, broken hearts, and uncertain dreams. You gave everything, your time, your energy, your love, often without expecting anything in return. But now, something feels different. The phone calls grow fewer. Your words, once treasured, are now brushed aside. Your advice is met with eye rolls, and sometimes they speak to you in a tone that stings more than silence ever could. It hurts, not because you expect to be praised, but because deep down you wonder, when did I become invisible in their eyes? If you felt this way, if you've noticed the shift, this video is for you. Because what if I told you there's a way to regain your place in their lives? Not through guilt, not through anger, but through quiet strength. Today I want to share 6 powerful changes that can help you reclaim your voice, your dignity, and yes, their respect. These aren't tricks, they're transformations. Some may surprise you, others may feel uncomfortable at first, but stay with me, because by the end, you won't just feel seen again, you'll feel respected. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Stop chasing their approval. One of the most painful traps a parent can fall into, especially later in life, is chasing the approval of their own children. You might not even realize you're doing it. It can start subtly. You cancel plans to fit their schedules. You say yes, even when your heart quietly says no. You bite your tongue when they're dismissive, telling yourself it's not worth the conflict. You tell yourself it's love, but often it's fear. Fear of losing connection, of being left behind, of no longer mattering. Here's the hard truth. The more you chase their approval, the more invisible you become. Respect isn't earned by erasing yourself. It's earned by respecting yourself first. I remember a woman named Margaret. In her youth, she was sharp, assertive, unafraid to speak her mind. But as her children grew older, she began shrinking her presence to accommodate theirs. She stayed silent when they interrupted her. She smiled through comments that used to make her flinch. She rearranged her life to remain easy to love. "I just want to keep the family together," she told me once, with tears she didn't let fall. But the more she faded, the less they saw her. Not out of cruelty, but because she taught them, silently, that her voice didn't matter anymore. What she didn't realize was this: you don't keep a family together by sacrificing your dignity. You do it by being someone worth gathering around. So if you find yourself constantly adjusting, apologizing, explaining, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this out of love or out of fear? Because the moment you stop chasing their approval, the moment you stand still in your own worth, everything changes. They may not notice it at first, but something shifts in the air. They begin to see you not as someone seeking validation, but as someone who no longer needs it. And that's when respect begins to return. If this message resonates with you so far, leave a quiet "I'm still here" in the comments below. It's not just a phrase, it's a declaration. You are still here. You still matter. When you're ready, join me in Chapter 2, because the next shift may be the most difficult, but also the most powerful. We'll talk about what happens when you stop arguing and start leading. Shall we? Chapter 2. Don't argue, lead by example. When your children speak to you with impatience, when they brush off your opinions, interrupt you mid-sentence, or roll their eyes when you offer guidance, it's natural to feel the fire rise in your chest. You want to push back. You want to remind them who changed their diapers, who stayed up through fevers, who sacrificed so they could stand where they stand now. You want to be heard. You want to be seen. But here's the problem with arguing. No one hears wisdom when it's shouted, and respect never grows in the soil of confrontation. Think back. When was the last time someone respected you more after a heated argument? I once met a man named Frank, a retired high school teacher. In his classroom, he was respected. His students listened when he spoke. He carried himself with calm authority. But at home, it was different. His adult children would cut him off in conversations. They'd laugh when he mispronounced something, or wave off his advice like it was outdated. At first he fought back, raised his voice, defended his knowledge, insisted he still had something to offer. But the more he argued, the more invisible he became. Then one day he made a quiet decision. He stopped trying to prove himself. Instead of demanding respect, he embodied it. He listened deeply, even when others didn't. He spoke calmly, not because he was passive, but because he was grounded. He no longer reacted to disrespect. He responded to it with presence, and slowly things began to change. His children leaned in when he spoke. They didn't always agree with him, but they stopped dismissing him because something in him had shifted. He no longer needed their respect to know his worth. And paradoxically, that's when they began offering it freely. If your children are disrespectful, you don't win them back by yelling louder. You win them back by refusing to lower yourself to that level. You become the calm in the storm, the anchor in their chaos, the one who doesn't need to shout because your presence speaks louder than your words. Let your example be the lesson, because no one forgets the quiet strength of someone who knows who they are and no longer needs to argue for it. If this truth is landing in your heart, share one word in the comments that describes how you want to show up moving forward. You don't need to justify it, just write it, claim it. Now, are you ready for chapter 3? Because the next lesson is perhaps the hardest of all. It's about the silent weight we place on our children without realizing it. Let's talk about emotional dependence. Chapter 3, Withdraw Your Emotional Dependence. There's a kind of silence that hurts more than words ever could. It's the silence of waiting by the phone, the silence of hoping they'll visit, and pretending you're not disappointed when they don't. It's the quiet ache of feeling like you've become a footnote in the very story you helped write. As parents, we give everything. But as we grow older, without meaning to, we begin to expect something in return. Not money, not gifts, just presence, just a call, a question, a moment of being remembered. And when it doesn't come, something inside us begins to shrink. But here's the difficult truth. The more emotionally dependent you become, the less emotionally available they are. I knew a woman once. Her name was Helen. She had been a loving, devoted mother. She made birthdays magical, wiped tears with patience, and sacrificed in ways her children would probably never fully understand. But after they grew up and moved out, she found herself waiting. She waited for texts, for visits, for the warmth that used to fill her kitchen. When it didn't come, she reached out, then again, and again. She called often, left voicemails, told them how much she missed them, asked why they didn't come more. She thought she was expressing love, but to them, it felt like pressure, and slowly, they began to pull away. What Helen didn't realize is that emotional dependence can feel like a quiet weight on someone's shoulders, even when it comes from love. People, even your own children, respect those who are whole on their own, not those who lean so heavily that it feels like emotional debt. One day, Helen made a change. She stopped waiting by the phone. She took up painting, started joining community events, took walks with friends, not regrets, and something unexpected happened. Her children began calling more. They became curious about her life, not out of guilt, but because she had one. She had gone from being someone who waited to someone they now wanted to hear from. The less she leaned, the more they leaned in. So if you found yourself holding your breath for their attention, exhaling only when they finally reach out, it's time to reclaim that air. You don't need them to fill your cup. You just need to remember you still have hands to lift it. If this message resonates with you, take a quiet step. Write down one thing you want to do for yourself this week. Not for them, for you. And when you're ready, come with me to chapter 4. Because the next change isn't just about how you feel, it's about what you allow. Let's talk about boundaries. Let me know when you're ready for chapter 4. Set boundaries and enforce them, and I'll continue the story with the same emotional weight and clarity. Chapter 4. Set boundaries and enforce them. Love is not a license for disrespect. Yet too often, in the name of keeping peace, we let things slide. We excuse the sharp tone. We brush off the dismissive remarks. We tell ourselves they're just stressed or they don't mean it. And in doing so, we teach them something dangerous, that our love has no limits, that our presence requires no respect. But here's the truth no one says out loud. People, even the ones who love you, will treat you the way you allow them to. I once met a man named Robert. He had spent his life building a business from the ground up, respected by clients, admired by colleagues. But at home it was different. His adult children interrupted him mid-sentence. They criticized his choices, mocked his routines, and rolled their eyes when he spoke. At first he stayed silent. He didn't want conflict. He told himself it wasn't worth the fight, that he was being the bigger person, but deep down he was shrinking. And the more he tolerated, the worse it became. Until one day he stopped, not with anger, not with shouting, but with boundaries. When his son cut him off mid-sentence, Robert calmly said, "I'll continue when you're ready to listen." When his daughter dismissed his opinion, he replied, "You don't have to agree with me, but I expect to be treated with respect." And when the disrespect continued, he drew a line. "If you can't speak to me with basic decency, I won't be part of the conversation." It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary. At first, they pushed back. They were surprised, even annoyed. But over time, they adjusted. Not because Robert demanded it, but because he demonstrated what self-respect looks like. Setting boundaries doesn't mean cutting your children out. It means showing them how to treat you. It means saying, "My love is unconditional, but my tolerance is not." And here's the beautiful part. When you begin to value your time, your energy, your voice, they begin to value it too. If this speaks to you, I invite you to reflect on one simple question. What behavior have I been tolerating that no longer deserves space in my life? Write it down, name it, and then decide what boundary honors your worth. Because you are not just a parent, you are a person, and your presence is not something to be endured. It is something to be earned. Ready for Chapter 5? Next, we'll talk about a subtle but costly habit, one that turns love into expectation and kindness into invisibility. Let's explore what happens when you give too much, without appreciation. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 5. Stop giving without appreciation, and I'll continue with the same poetic yet grounded tone. Chapter 5. Stop giving without appreciation. There's a difference between generosity and surrender. As parents, giving is woven into our DNA. We give our time, our patience, our money, our presence, not because we expect something in return, but because giving is how we love. But love doesn't mean emptying yourself for those who no longer see the value in what you give. Because when kindness is met with entitlement, when effort is met with silence, and when love is met with expectation, you're not building connection. You're building resentment. I knew a father named George. For years, he was the rock of his family. If his children needed help, he gave it. If they needed money, he sent it. If they needed him to drop everything, he did, without question. But something strange happened. The more he gave, the less they said thank you. They didn't ask. They expected. They didn't appreciate. They demanded. And then one day, George needed help. He didn't ask for much, just a small favor, a ride to an appointment. But everyone was too busy. That night, he sat alone in his kitchen and realized something painful. His giving had become invisible. So George made a quiet change. He stopped offering help before it was asked. He stopped giving when it came at the cost of his peace. He stopped saying yes to things that made him feel small. At first, his children didn't understand. They thought he was being cold. But slowly, something shifted. They started saying thank you again. They stopped asking for everything and started asking if he was available. Because suddenly they remembered that his time, his help, his love wasn't endless. It was a gift, and gifts are not guaranteed. If you've been giving endlessly to those who no longer appreciate it, take a breath. Ask yourself, am I giving because I want to, or because I feel I have to? Because generosity should never be payment for attention. It should be a reflection of your heart, not a sacrifice of your worth. If this resonates, I invite you to comment with the words, "My giving has value," not to prove anything, but to remind yourself that your kindness deserves acknowledgement and your boundaries deserve respect. In Chapter 6, we'll take one final step, perhaps the most freeing of all, because it's time to build something powerful, a life that stands strong beyond your children. Let's talk about purpose. Let's talk about joy. Let's talk about you. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 6. Build a life outside of them, and I'll continue with the same emotional richness and clarity to conclude your series with impact. Chapter 6. Build a life outside of them. There comes a moment, often quiet, often unexpected, when you realize that your life has been orbiting around people who no longer revolve around you. And it stings. You devoted years, maybe decades, putting their needs first. You made their dreams your mission. You carried their worries, celebrated their joys, and anchored the family like a lighthouse in every storm. But now they have lives of their own, and you're left wondering, where do I fit? Here's the answer. You don't need to fit into their lives. You need to reclaim your own, because the deepest respect doesn't come from being needed. It comes from being whole. I once met a woman named Alana. She was in her late 70s, a widow, a mother, and for a long time, a shadow in her own story. After her husband passed, she poured all of her time into her children. She checked in constantly, gave advice no one asked for, waited by the door for visits that never came. Her children loved her, but they felt suffocated. They began pulling away. And Alana was left in the echo of a home that once pulsed with life. Until one day she stopped waiting. She joined a book club. She started walking by the lake every morning. She volunteered at a local school library, reading to children whose names she didn't know, but whose smiles filled her days. And slowly, something shifted. Her children started calling, not out of guilt, but out of curiosity. They wanted to hear about her life. They admired her independence. They respected her joy, because she had become something they hadn't seen in a long time. A woman who lived, and living, is magnetic. If your identity has been tied solely to being a parent, it's time to expand. You were someone before them, and you are still someone now. Pick up a hobby, make a new friend. Try something you've always put off, not because it makes you useful, but because it makes you feel alive. Let your children see that you are not a retired caretaker, but a vibrant soul with dreams that didn't expire the day they grew up. And if they don't notice right away, that's okay. This journey isn't about proving anything to them. It's about rediscovering everything within you. If you've stayed with me through all 6 chapters, I want to thank you. Not just for listening, but for being willing to face something that so many avoid. The quiet grief of changing roles. The courage it takes to shift your own story. So let me leave you with this. Respect is not something you demand. It's something you embody. And when you walk through the world with quiet dignity, when you set boundaries with love, when you give with intention, and when you live with purpose, something incredible happens. Your children start to look at you differently, not as someone waiting in the wings, but as someone standing tall in their own light. And that, more than anything, is where true respect is born. If this message touched your heart, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Just one insight, one shift, one thing you're taking with you, because your voice matters here, and you're not alone. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, keep standing, keep shining, and above all, keep living.